Hello guys, welcome to Ethereum Power. Recently, in my latest video about Solana, we covered how we were observing a breakdown on the weekly and on the daily, and what was the motivation to do so. In this in-depth video about Solana, we'll cover a follow-up with how things are evolving. We still have a ton of liquidation to deal with, on-chain data, sending some bearish signals that I want to share with you guys. We'll cover some news. Of course, you're not going to find any other video across all crypto YouTube with such an enormous amount of all domains of information in a single packed video around the 10 minutes mark. If you want to trade Solana, you can consider opening a new account on 2bit exchange. This exchange was built by the same people from Bybit. 2 minutes to register, deposit your crypto, withdraw your crypto, no need for KYC, 200x leverage, altcoins, Bitcoin, anything that you need, and they even give you $50 to start trading as a welcome bonus, even before you deposit. Now, once you deposit, you can take a bite of the 30,000 USD trading bonus. All of that based on the amount you deposit and trade volume. Let's start with the weekly RSI. Why not? We had a breakout in this area in here in Solana. That is the most bullish thing that we have seen on Solana since March 2024. Yeah, because this breakout in here was really humble. We reached 70 and we ended up putting lower lows. So this one is the one that is supposed to be the king at the moment. And right after Ethereum peak in dominance, we were expecting for Solana to do something. That's why we put this protection line in here in green to see if the healthiness of the breakout is at its peak of performance, of if we are starting to see some signs of erosion. And unfortunately, that is kind of the case, because on the 22nd of September, in one of our videos, we pointed out that we broke down in here. We talk about the support of 56, 57, which we haven't broken, but now all we have done is to come back into the resistance of 60, and this week we are pushing lower. Is it a lower low? No, not yet. Is it a rejection from that? It could turn into that. We'll have to see in the next incoming days. This is still an intra candle, and it has the potential on Sunday, if we saw a pump, to reclaim the green. It's an intra candle, sure. But at the time I'm recording the video, it's pointing still down, and it could form a bearish divergence that can send us back into another line down of support located around the 51. Of course, that is if we break the support. Now, in terms of price action, this rejection around the 240, that was previous support, and then doing all this effort just to hit that as a revenge rally is what I was fearing. It's not yet confirmed. It's not for absolutely true that this has to reject and lose the $200 and go straight into 180 again. That was previous resistance. But we need to be prepared for that potential scenario. The most bullish thing that Solana can do at this point in time is reclaim 250 and completely erase the potential to really go that low again. But let's continue seeing under the carpet. Let's see what we can find. This channel is all about data, so that's what we're gonna do before we conclude anything. At the end of the video, I'll give you a summary, of course. So Solana was acting very bullish. Why? Because all-time highs of longs were achieved mid-September. And what we are doing in here is we are clearing out that excessive amount of longs that went beyond the highest percentile and went above the horizontal 66 that we never crossed on Solana ever before. So coming back down into the area of value is not a bad thing. The problem is that this is on the weekly time frame, and the area of value could still be around this edge of 55 and still turn into an area of value, despite the fact that the price will have to come down for that. Socials are not elevated. We are in the median. Nothing is really that big happening in Solana at this point in time from that point of view. We got that sweet largest liquidity pools on the upper end at 255 and at 264. But there is a thing that looks very sketchy in here with Solana, which is the elevated amount of liquidity that we have on the bottom end. If you don't believe me, let me swap this to Bitcoin so you get a comparison and you don't think that I'm just bullshitting, which could be the case sometimes. Look at the liquidity on the top end on Bitcoin. We got 128 and 141, both of those levels, and I'm tempted to say that even the 135 is higher than any peak below the price up until 67K. Going back into Solana, you're gonna see that things are quite the opposite, and that's because so many longs have entered from levels of 143, 165, 181, and we are in a context where on the daily we are kind of breaking down, right? I cannot put this line perfectly here, but this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a breakdown, a retest currently going on the daily time frame as well. It's not only the weekly, this one that is breaking down on the RSI in the price or the rejection of the revenge on the price, but now is also the daily. Now, what do we have on the lower end? If we went just for 184, that will be less than the top end. So comparing apples with apples and pears with pears, that distance that is more or less the same. This is at 20% down to get into 180, or to the upside is also at 20% to get into 265, but the upper end is more. Where things get a little bit scary is if we went, or if we needed to go slightly deeper. If we go into 163, that's a 26% deviation, and at that point that liquidity will turn into more than the upside. Let's go into Glassnode and let's compare from a different perspective. Shorter term, largest on the lower end up until 216. That's for a scalper kind of mindset. But if we look into 3 months, we see from below 200 into 150 is very heavy in the past 6 months. Bitcoin does have liquidity at 107, very heavy, but it's very specific. It's 107 to 108 and nothing else. Whereas in Solana, you have a whole spectrum to 150 that is very heavy. We put a lower low in here relative to this low, and we put a lower high. So the structure is almost about to be ready for a change in structure unless we take the highs of 250, as I explained earlier. Looking at the performance at the moment of Solana against Ethereum, this is the ratios chart, and you can see that we have rallied a lot. We have the dominance of Solana against Ethereum up until mid-April. From that point and on, so Ethereum did its own rally. It raised the bar by going way higher in the Ethereum dominance itself, and that only allowed Solana to reach 0.05, which is a strong level of resistance, 3 times in here, and the peak of the market in the previous cycle is also there. So definitely guys, we do want to see that Solana overtakes Ethereum as we come to the end of the topping year in Bitcoin. At that point, we could see a breakout finally against Ethereum. We still don't have it. We've been accumulating in here the momentum very similar to this. Notice very similar to, but very similar to the action of the momentum within the bear market, which is interesting as well. We are not really comparing the same thing. When it comes to the Z-score, we are on the lower end, but very close to the median. The MFI is in the median, and so it is the RSI, but it really needs to rally a bit more to get into that resistance. At that point, it's going to be above this level. We need that to break out, and then we can confirm that Solana can overtake Ethereum. I still expect, number one, Ethereum to make a dip. I'm not fully sure if it's going to be a lower low relative to 3.8, and then a recovery on Ethereum, a rally on Ethereum, and then Solana. That is according to past performance. That is what I'm used to, but I'm ready to be surprised. Solana at the moment is overheated in 2 aspects, in the futures volume bubble map and in the taker sell dominant, particularly both ends on the future side. You can see that we have had big bubbles in red in this area. More than ever before, we have cooled down into the pink at the moment, but we are still very close to the area of correction that could bring in some additional correction, and in the futures taker, you see where we are. If you look at this, there are some areas that after being in the red, you still push up, like the early area of the bear market into bull, or the early bull as well. But in these areas more recently, that's typically the area where we see some correction. And I'm only showing you data that supports that thesis. Of course, you need risk management because data can flip around overnight and maybe by next week something really bullish comes in. I still don't see that coming in, but if it does, everything can shift a U-turn overnight. This is crypto, guys. JP Morgan spot Solana ETFs may see only 1.5 billion inflows in 1 year. That is just a speculation, but that is kind of a bearish signal in terms of expectation of how much exposure we're gonna get from institutions. Daily Solana transactions are down 50% since July. BNB has been making a lot of news. Binance Coin and their own blockchain associated to Binance taking the lead. So far, Solana being a bit quiet on that end, in my opinion. On-chain activity softness can weaken the usage narrative into the ETF's event, raises risk of a buy the rumor, sell the news dynamics. 4 out of 10 again. Camino announces formal verification milestone plus 1.5 million Immunify back bounty, strengthens the DeFi security on Solana, reduced exploit risk, supports sustainable total value lock and user confidence, incrementally positive for Solana overall. That's a 6 out of 10, just a moderate bullish. So let's do a summary. At the moment, if we identify the risk on Solana, it is quite large. We have too many longs, that's for sure. We are getting close to the area of value. We have seen a cool down, but I still see a lot of liquidations right underneath the price. We see the breakdown on the daily going on in here, our retests coming in, and the thing that defends a potential continuation to upside could be limit. It could be just this 20% taking that liquidity there and still some downside, just because the main narrative of futures when it comes to market maker is that not everybody can win, and at the moment with so many liquidations from longs position already in here makes it as a great narrative for either dump it and take them out of the way, 1, or 2, push into the immediate liquidity sitting up until 263, that's it, and now go for all the longs in one go, sub $200, because that is where the largest pools are currently located. And the bubbles and futures is currently supporting that thesis. So let's see how Solana behaves in the next upcoming months. If you appreciate this video, hit the like, write down a comment down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, bye bye.